And welcome back to Your Viewpoint. This is your host, Patrick Deya. China.
Yes, China.
China is very big in Africa now.
Yes, they are.
And they seem to have a different model from
Yes.
the West.
Yes.
And because of that, there seems to be an embrace of that model. And you can, that is witnessed by the how the African leaders have welcomed China.
Yes.
There have been workshops in China. What is, where is that headed?
Well, it's a good question. I get the question about China all the time. And I say two or three things about China. China's coming into the continent, into Africa, is a question of a case of being the right place at the right time. China is investing heavily in infrastructure. The continent neglected developing its infrastructure. Post-colonialism, many of our countries, 40, 50 years later, had done very little in terms of investing in infrastructure. And that is part of the reason why our development has been hampered. By infrastructure, I'm talking about roads, transport, energy, etc. Now, China comes into this continent. China has an agenda. There's absolutely no doubt about it. China is looking for markets for its products, but China is also looking for consumers, for places where they can invest, where there are large markets. Africa has, as I mentioned earlier, in another 7, 8 years, we will have a population of 1 billion. We know that with this growing population and with a significant number of people coming out of poverty and therefore having a disposable income, you have quite a significant consumer class there. The Chinese know that. The Chinese also realize that there was a lack of infrastructure, and they've come in and they're investing very heavily in infrastructure. What will this enable them to do? This will enable them to endear themselves to the African leaders and the African communities. Say they were here, they invested in infrastructure, and as a result of the investment in infrastructure, we are seeing development beginning to happen, because once that infrastructure in place, then business begins to thrive. So the advantage that they will have is that they will already have invested, they will already have built relationships. When they first came in 10 years ago, the model they were applying was, very unacceptable. They were coming in, they were bringing huge numbers of laborers. Africa has found this unacceptable. So now, with the investments that they are making, they are required in Kenya, for example, generally in East Africa, that if they are going to bring a company that is going to do construction work, that they must work together with a local company. The other thing is that with this growing middle class in the continent, China has realized that they can also just set up shop in many places on the continent, produce products and services that will be consumed, that they will not need to produce. So they're looking at both a market for Chinese products, but they're also looking at a place where they can get raw materials. Obviously, there's oil and there's minerals, and they want that, and they need. But I see a situation where there will be Chinese companies that will be doing exactly what I was talking about earlier, doing value addition right in the continent and putting into the global economy and the global market finished products which will fetch higher returns, which can only be good for the continent. That's the situation. It has been perceived as a sort of an unfair, unbalanced competition because Chinese companies have state backing, and the response to that, I see recently, for example, the Export-Import Bank in the United States, for example, stepping in when General Electric, for example, was bidding to provide locomotives, trains in Pakistan. I see the Export-Import Bank of the United States stepping in and providing the kind of backup that the Chinese government has been providing for Chinese companies. So yes, China is there. China is there to stay. The important thing for Africa and African leaders is to make sure that we manage the relationship with China in such a way. Obviously, China will get something out of this, but to make sure that we ourselves are clear about what we stand to get from this relationship. If this is a relationship that is going to bring about development, if this is a relationship that is going to remove a very significant number of Kenyans, of Africans, 1 in 2 Africans out of poverty, this is a relationship that we must encourage. What we must avoid is a relationship that is going to be exploitative. We've been through that with our colonial history, and it would be very unfortunate if we allowed ourselves to slide. But I see a lot of safeguards being put in place to make sure that we don't get into that kind of a situation, and making a lot of demands, the Chinese.
And in that light, if you were to sit down with in a room full of business people within the United States, and you talking to business people within the DC metro area, Virginia, the Northern Virginia is very business heavy oriented.
That's right.
What would you tell them about Kenya and about Africa?
What I have been telling them, and what I will continue to tell them, is Kenya has many advantages in terms of a place where if you invest, the returns are not only going to be significant, but secondly, that an investment in Kenya is an investment in the region. You must see an investment in Kenya as your entry into a market, an environment that over the next 10 years is going to be a very significant market, and a production region that the whole world is going to be depending on. We have valuable assets, natural resources and other. We have a growing middle class. We have a very well developed human resource capacity in Kenya, probably the best in sub-Saharan Africa. You will find Kenyan professionals all over the world. In this country, no exception. Here in Washington, I've met many Kenyans in science, in banking and finance, in ICT and so forth. So an investment in Kenya is automatically an investment in the East African community, population and a market of 150 million. An investment in the East African region and the East African community is an investment in the community for East and Southern Africa, a population of 500 million. A growing middle class, significant natural resources in this region, a very vibrant and fairly well educated young population. From Nairobi, your access into the rest of the continent within 4 hours. The tip of Africa to the south, the tip of Africa to the west, the tip of Africa to the north, all within 4 hours from Nairobi. There couldn't be a better place and a better positioning in terms of where to go. We have a vibrant private sector. We have significant American investments already. And one of the ways to check again, to make sure that there are companies such as General Motors who've been in Kenya now for the last more than 40 years, Coca-Cola, to name a few, that have been there for a long time. And we're looking to bring more American companies in various sectors. And I've talked with them in the energy sector. We are very big on renewable energy. We want to be the country in the world by the year 2030 that has an economy that is run entirely on clean and renewable energy. We have a significant amount of energy in the form of geothermal. We're investing heavily in wind energy. We're investing heavily in solar energy. So that is a sector that is open. ICT I've mentioned, with the introduction of the fiber optic cables, all sorts of opportunities that are ICT related, communications, big and open, manufacturing. retail and wholesale, tourism, very big one, hospitality industry. So you mention it, and again, because Kenya, luckily for us, because of we don't have oil, we don't have any of those so-called precious minerals and metals and so forth. What we have done over the years is we have grown an economy with a broad base, broad-based in the sense that we have mixed, we have a manufacturing sector that we have grown, we have a service sector that we have grown, we have an agriculture sector that we've grown, we have a communication sector that we've grown. So we are not dependent on just one element, and that's why our economy is able to sustain and withstand, you know, a lot of the sort of the up and down that you will see in the global economy. If you're too dependent on the global economy for your exports, when things go down, you go down. But fortunately for us, we've really diversified the economy, and we have 6 or 7 different sectors in which we have invested and that are growing, and in which there are numerous opportunities for investment.
I know it is too early to ask this question, but I'll ask it anyway.
Yes.
If there was one thing that you would like to leave behind, your legacy, what would that be? What would you like to achieve that you would be remembered by?
It would need to be more than one. But if it was to be one, I would say that I would like to see a situation where, after my being here, the relationship between the United States is better than it has ever been, both in terms of the people of America and the people of Kenya, the people-to-people relationship. And that can be signified by, for example, an increase in the number of tourists who go from the United States to Kenya. That can be signified, for example, by the level of visits that we get from high-ranking government officials from the United States, everybody from the president to the Secretary of State to other high-ranking government officials. And thirdly, that can be signified by and indicated by the numbers of new investments that we see coming from the United States into Kenya, and Kenyan products, and we have some significant products that we would also like to see come into this economy. So that would be my dream and my wish.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Your Excellency.
Thank you very much for the time.
For your time.
Thank you.
And I want to wish you all the best.
Thank you
and
very
you're
much.
welcome to the community.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Thank you. Super.
And with that, I want to thank you for watching this program. This is Your Viewpoint with Patrick Deya. Thank you.